Hi everyone. In today's video, we are going to go over the concept of object storage in OCI and its architecture at a high level. So, object storage is a regional service provided to each customer for storage on cloud. Now, as the name suggests, it's a regional service. That means it is not tied to any availability domain or fault domain. Now, object storage can be used for storing your unstructured data like images, videos, logs, or it can also be used for storing your structured data like files and reports, etc. One of the key feature of Oracle Object Storage is it provides unlimited high performance. It is highly durable and a secured data storage. Now, coming to the architecture of object storage, whenever you sign up for Oracle Cloud account, you get assigned a certain tenancy and a unique immutable namespace. So each tenancy will have its own unique namespace. Now, inside this namespace, you will have your compartments and buckets. So whenever you go and start provisioning the buckets, you get two options, standard and archive. For your day-to-day activities and storing your data, the preferred type is standard. If you want to purge the data and store it for a longer duration, that is where you go for a archived type of bucket. Another two thing is whenever you provision a bucket, the visibility of the bucket is by default private. You can go and edit the visibility to public. And this is something that we will see when we log into the console and start doing the hands-on on the object storage components. Now, whatever components or whatever objects that you have in your public bucket can be accessed over the internet either through a browser or your command line interface or even using REST APIs. But for the components or the objects that you have inside your private bucket, you need to have certain groups and you need to assign certain IAM policies for it. How to do that is something that we will see in the next video. Another feature of object storage is the object versioning. Now, by default, this object versioning is disabled. That means if you try to upload the same object again in the bucket, it gets overwritten. But if you want to maintain the versioning, first you need to enable it. And then you will see that if you upload the object with the same name, it automatically starts tracking the version. Now, the key thing to note here is once you enable the versioning, it cannot be reversed. It can be turned off. The only thing you can do is you can suspend the versioning from that point onwards. Now, another important feature is the LCM policies. Now, there are two ways to purge the data or purge the objects from your bucket. Either you manually do it or you create certain LCM policies and you tag it to the bucket. What it will do is, depending on the kind of configuration you have done when you create the policies, the objects in the buckets will be automatically purged depending on the duration you set, and there are other parameters also. Now coming to the security of the objects inside your bucket. Now there are two types of encryptions. The objects inside the bucket are encrypted. Either you can use Oracle managed keys or you can go with BYOK, that is bring your own key. If you want to go for BYOK, you need to set up the data vault and store your keys in that. Now, along with the encryption that is done at the object level, there is certain master encryption key that is assigned at the bucket level as well. Now, the next feature is the replication. Now, this replication is a very useful feature if you want to set up a DR. Now, take an example that you have a object storage set up on a region that is your home region on the east coast of United States. Now, you want to set up a DR for the west coast. What you can do is using the replication mechanism, you can replicate the contents of your bucket from your home region to your DR region. The last thing is, or the last but one thing is the pre-authentication request. Now, what Oracle recommends is instead of giving the access to users, instead of giving them the access to the objects inside the bucket for a longer duration, if they are the users who are going to use that object only for a certain duration of time, you go for a pre-authentication request or PAR. So what happens is at the object level, you create a pre-authentication request and you decide a duration that, okay, this object should only be visible for a day or two, depending on the duration you want to set. But once you create that pre-authentication request, it generates a URL. You give that URL to your intended business users, and they will be able to access that URL for the designated period of time. Once that duration is over, that URL will no longer work. So this is what Oracle recommends, that instead of going for setting up groups, IAM policies, the classic case here is like, for example, you have a business report or some data that you want to give access to only certain users, and that too only for a certain duration of time. You put that content in a private bucket. You create a pre-authentication request, share the URL with the business users so that they can access that data for the certain duration of time. With this theoretical understanding around the object storage and its features, now let's jump to our OCI console and start doing some hands-on exercise. So I'll go to OCI console. What you need to do is you need to go to storage and buckets. And the next thing you need to do is create a bucket. I'll give the name as test because, or I'll just rename it as demo. Now, as you can see, there are two storage tiers, standard and archive. For all your practical purposes, you go ahead with standard, because archive is something that you will only use if you have a use case for archival purpose or storing that data for a longer duration of time. Now, there are certain features available depending on whether you want to enable them or not. Like, for example, auto tiering, object versioning. So by default, all these are unchecked. If you want, you can always enable them later on as well. Then the next is encryption, whether you want to encrypt using Oracle managed keys or you want to go for a customer managed key. So I'll keep all the default options as is, and I'll click on create. If you see here, the default visibility, like I mentioned, is private. If I click on demo, and what I'll need to do is edit visibility, I'll click on public and I'll click on save changes. Now, if I go anyway here, you can see here as well that the visibility is changed to public. Now, what I will do is I'll just upload one dummy object inside this bucket. So I'll click on upload. I'll click on select files. I'll select certain pic. I'll name it as pic, and I'll click on upload. I'll click on close. Okay, so this object is uploaded now. Now, if you see here, there is no versioning enabled. If you see, object versioning is disabled. That's why there is a single version of the same. Now, if I want to enable the object versioning, I'll click on edit. I'll click on enable versioning. Now, if I scroll down, because I have enabled, it is now showing that there is a single version of the same. Now let me try to upload the same object again. I'll name it as pic. And I'll upload. I'll click on close. Now let's see whether it has created. If you see, it has created two versions of the same, and it is telling you which one is the latest version. Now, if you have to delete it, you need to ensure that because you have enabled the object versioning, you have to delete all the versions. Another thing is, because now you have enabled the object versioning, like I mentioned, you cannot turn it off. The only thing you can do is suspend the versioning. What it will do is, going forward, it will not enable the versioning, or it will not create the versions of the new objects. But if there are objects that are already versioned, it cannot be rolled back. Now, there are certain options here, like which I was talking about, the replication policy, the retention rules, and life cycle policy rules. So if I go to any, for example, retention rules, there is no rule created right now. If I go on create rule, it will, here you will decide for how long you want to retain the objects. So if your retention amount is days or if your retention amount is years, depending on the options that you select here, those retention rules gets automatically applied. Similarly, lifetime policy, life cycle policy rules. So what it does is it decides after certain duration of days. I mean, these days will be decided by you, whether it is 30, 20, 10, depending on the number you give. After that, the objects will be automatically moved to archive, or you have an option to delete it as well. So what it will do is you don't need to worry about manually go and delete the objects. Once you define these lifecycle policy rules, that is automatically taken care of. Now the next thing is pre-authentication request. So if I go to objects, I'll create pre-authentication request and I'll name it as test. You have an option whether you want to just permit the read or you want to give permission to write also, or permission to both read and write. You need to select this option very carefully, because depending on what you select here, the person who has access to use to that URL will be able to either write or only read, or do the both. Then you can select the expiration date depending on for what duration you want certain users to have access to this object. For now, I will just give default as it is, and I'll click on create pre-authentication request. If you see, it has created a certain URL. If I copy this URL, if I see in the browser, it is showing me the pic that I uploaded. So anybody who has access to this URL, this URL is nothing but your pre-authentication request, will be able to access this image. And once the duration is over, then this will no longer be accessible. So I'll close it. Then let's go to metrics. I don't have many objects, so I'm not sure if anything will be visible here. Okay, so because I don't have a lot of content, so it is not visible over here. Then, okay, so we covered pre-authentication request, replication policy, retention rules. Okay, and the last thing I will do is basically, I'll just show you how to delete the content. So I'll go to bucket details, I'll go to object storage. And in case you now want to get rid of this bucket that you have created, so I'll click here and I'll click on delete. I'll type the demo because it's asking me to type demo to confirm delete. I'll click on delete. So the bucket that I created is automatically deleted. So I hope you found this video around the fundamental concepts of object storage helpful. In the next video, we will go into some advanced concept on how to use OCI CLI to upload the content into this bucket, or how to even create the bucket. Because right now what we have done is we have created the bucket from the console, but in practicality, not everyone other than probably selected set of users will have access to this console to create the bucket. So in such case, how you can create the bucket, how you can upload the objects inside that bucket using certain other utilities like command line interface or REST APIs. We will see it in the next video. Till then, thank you.